ForeFlight talk there. And one of the things I really like about doing it in person is I can bring a spare computer with a flight simulator on it and a hotspot, and everybody can connect your iPad into my flight simulator, and we can demonstrate not just pre-flight ground techniques and resources in ForeFlight, but we can also get into doing in-flight techniques with it in the simulator. So it's a great opportunity. I can walk around the room and help everybody get connected in the right way and make sure their charts are showing what they need to be showing for what we're demonstrating at that moment. I haven't quite got the technology to do that yet in this environment, but what I'll do instead here in just a moment is I'll share my ForeFlight screen so you can see what I'm looking at, you can't quite see where I'm pointing on the screen, touching on a particular place, but you'll see the result of that. And I don't really know a better way to do that. So we'll make do with this. We won't be able to do much in-flight stuff with it, but I'll show you some ground and pre-flight techniques that I found are pretty helpful. Some things I think are confusing to a lot of ForeFlight people and ForeFlight users, and hopefully get you squared away and on the way. If you have any particular questions, jot them down. We'll try first to address your questions through the chat box as much as we can, or if Carrie can keep an eye on that and jump in and interrupt me with a particular question, I'll show that technique or that piece of information. And then I'll look on the chat box as well. Toward the end, we'll see how things are going. Maybe we can unmute mics and you can ask your question orally if you like. And sometimes that's a little confusing to do with this particular venue, but we'll see how far we get.
Yeah.
So I've been using ForeFlight in my little airplane pretty much since I got an iPad, which our company started using them about 6 or 8 years ago now. I just changed airplanes. That's my new ride over there, my 787. I fly that now on long haul over water routes. Just Thursday morning, I got back from Honolulu. That's the shortest flight I did. Wow. It was the only time I've flown a flight without relief pilots on board, no rest break, and that was horrible. But before that, the previous 8 or 10 flights I've done have all been to Incheon, Korea. And then I popped down to Shanghai and pick up a whole bunch of cargo. We've been picking up 50 to 60,000 pounds of cargo at a pop. Wow. And these flights literally are the survival of my company at the moment. We're making a tremendous amount of money on these, and it helps keep the rest of the operation afloat. So it feels good to be a part of that. It feels good to be flying finally a new airplane, back on the long haul international stuff, which I really enjoy doing. And I've flown over Russia now and China and all that, and all these places I never thought I'd go. And here I am flying along. So we don't use ForeFlight at work, though. We use Jeppesen FD Pro, which, in case you're not aware, Jeppesen bought ForeFlight a couple of years ago. So we've already seen a little migration in some of the features in our Jeppesen have come from ForeFlight. The measuring stick, for instance, the one in the Jeppesen FD Pro looks identical to the one in ForeFlight. So some of these things are starting to align a little bit. But back to the GA world, I've never seen a technology adopted as quickly as ForeFlight and the iPad has been in the GA world. And this iPad's been out for about 10 years, and almost instantly some enterprising pilots got started with it and started using it in the airplane. And ForeFlight in particular has turned into an incredibly powerful tool. And there's so much more information available in it through it. I think it's making flying safer. So what I thought I would start with here, let me start with sharing the screen here. You're gonna look at my iPad here in just a moment. I have to connect up the screen sharing, and it takes it a moment with my network here at home. There you go. So you should now be seeing my ForeFlight screen on a sectional chart centered on the LA area. And that, what the heck? Where's that? Oh, that's my flight home from Honolulu the other day. So yeah, a bit of a long flight. That's why I have some warnings in here. I'll go ahead and clear that out. So the first thing I thought I would start with is, you notice we're looking at a VFR chart. This is a sectional chart of the Los Angeles area. That blue dot's where I'm speaking to you from. As you zoom in more and more, eventually we'll see it change. Oops, got the measuring stick there instead. You'll see it change right there from a sectional chart into a tack chart. You can see the chart kind of change a little bit. So now we know that we're looking at a tack chart. And if for some reason we wanted to look back at the sectional while it's still zoomed in like this, you can just do a single tap on the screen anywhere in there, and it will cycle through to the next chart. So now it takes us back to a sectional chart. You can tap it again, and it goes back to the tack chart. So generally speaking, if you're flying around the local area here, the tack chart is a little bit more readable, has more usable information for you at this range. But if you're not seeing the right thing, you might just not have that downloaded. Now there's another setting we can do. If you tap the little gear up at the top of the chart there, that's the settings. And I'm going to show you one of the things I find a lot of pilots aren't aware of. I don't know how often any of you folks fly through the LA area, through the corridors that are over the top of LAX, say the mini route or the special flight rules route there. Where do you find the information you need to fly that route? And the requirement is that you have to have a current tack chart on board to operate on the Vfr route over the top of LAX. Well, there are two ways to find it. One way is you come down here, scroll down in the settings box, you'll see a map touch action. If you tap in that map touch action, it takes you to 3 different settings. So right now, I have the map touch action is set to bring chart to front. And that's what's allowing us to see this tack chart and then the sectional chart alternating. If instead you come down here and you click it on bring chart to front with legends, okay, now when we zoom out a little bit here, I'm going to go just to this range. We're going to come over to the side here. When you touch the chart, you can move over to the side here. You have all the information that's on the side panel of your paper chart. And in particular on the Los Angeles area, you're going to see these 5 routes over the top of Los Angeles. And this is where the legal information is that you can have available in order to operate on these routes. So what I want to show you in particular is the special flight rules area. We zoom back in on this area. So there's your route. You're going to fly off the Santa Monica 132 degree radial at 3,500 feet if you're going southeast bound. And if you're going northwest bound, you're going to start over there from Hawthorne. So this is the chart, the plan view of where you're going to be operating on that SFRA. Now you come down here and here's the rules for operating on it. And I'll give you an aside, this is not a ForeFlight thing. This is just a Mike's preference thing. I don't like this Vfr route. I only fly it if it's really the only option available for me. And the reason is, to me, it's kind of the wild, wild west. So here's just a general question for you. Is it ever okay to be in a Class B airspace without a clearance from ATC? So think about that for a moment. What do you think? One of the requirements is you always need to be talking to ATC. You need to hear ATC say you are cleared to enter the Bravo, right? This is an exception. You can operate on this route inside the Bravo. And that's why I put quotes around that corridor. It's not really a corridor. It's not a hallway through the Class B. That's the old days. We used to have the VFR corridor over Los Angeles. That was, you were actually not in the Bravo airspace. Now, with the current implementation of this, you are in Class Bravo airspace and you do not have an ATC clearance. Instead, you have to follow these rules. And the first time I did this route, probably about 12 or 13 years ago in my 182, I was minding my own business, flying on this radial northwest bound there at 4,500 feet. I'm following all the rules. I'm equipped. I've got the tack chart with me. I'm on that radial. I'm at that altitude. I'm indicating about 130 knots, give or take, in my 182. My lights are all on, and turbojet aircraft are prohibited. I get passed up by a Cessna Citation like I'm standing still. So this guy is violating at least 2 of the rules on this chart. He's operating over 140 knots and he's operating a turbojet. So that's when I thought, I don't like being here. If there's somebody else not following the rules, what is everybody else doing here? So my preference is one of the other routes. But this is the page where you know what you can do. So this is one way to find it. And the only way you see that, you notice when I zoom back out again, that went away. So you have to zoom back in on this chart enough to see it, and now you'll see the side panel section of the chart.
Wow.
There is another place to find that, and that's if you tap down here in the documents. It's the fourth button over at the bottom in documents. And I'm going to show you the way that you can find it for everybody is down here in the drives on that left-hand side. You should be able to, you see this FAA. You click in that FAA, and this is a drive now full of documents. And if we come down here, we look at the visual chart supplemental folder. We're going to open that up. And this is where all the extra charts, all that, not just the TAC chart itself, but all the peripheral data on that chart. For, in my case, I have all the TAC charts in the country downloaded. So all the extra data is loaded in here. You can see this, the Las Vegas supplemental and the San Diego chart supplemental, actually. So this is the zoomed in version of this. And I really recommend, if you operate on these flights, you need to have these charts downloaded and available in your airplane so that you have this information, and kind of just spend a few minutes sometime getting into this and seeing how do you see this data. It's one thing to have the data on board, but it's not like having a paper chart that you can reach out and unfold and find it. You have to know where it is in your tool. So spend some time and figure out where this data is and get comfortable, get fluent with seeing that data. So we look back over here to the Los Angeles TAC chart supplemental, and you give it a single tap and you can get rid of the margin stuff at the top and bottom. And now here's the Coliseum route. You got a full page now with the Hollywood Park route, mini route, coastal route, and again, the Vfr rules. And you can zoom in on this. If you tap the screen, this is a technique I'm going to revisit again in just a couple of minutes on another section. But we can mark this chart up. On the top left corner, you see that little pencil thing. You can tap on that, and now this gives you a pencil that you can write on the chart. So, oh, I didn't want a blue one and I didn't want to do all that. So let me undo that. Give me a red pen, and you can adjust the size of this mark. I like somewhere right in this range, probably. You can make it anywhere from completely opaque down to almost barely visible. So whatever you prefer. For this demonstration here, I'll just do 100%. So you have to squawk 1201. You have to, there's a frequency somewhere that you have to talk on. Where's that frequency listed? It's kind of a CTAF frequency. Oh, they don't have it listed anymore. But we can highlight again the altitude. Oops. It's a little bit of a hassle sometimes if you have it zoomed in and you're scrolling around. You can either pan the page or you can make a marking. If I want to pan the page, I have to turn the pencil off, scroll it up to where I want to see it, and then turn the pencil back on again. So 4,500 feet is my altitude. So I might want to highlight some things like this to make it more clear. And then I can be done with that. I can zoom it back out. I can go look at the map. I can go, figure something else out. Let's go down to Brown Field here, to your neck of the woods. I can go back over there to documents, and there's my chart again with the highlights on it. So this is the concept of marking up your charts. Works really well, and you can highlight all this information, and then hopefully that'll steer your eyes toward it when you're in the airplane and trying to find stuff. So let me just see advisory frequency for the LAX Vfr. Yes, there it is. Thank you. Big box right there. I can't even read my own writing. So I knew it was on there somewhere. Okay, so that is enough for that. Any questions on the supplemental chart information? I'm not seeing much else in here just yet. I do see a couple other questions, and we'll come back to those. Yes, actually, Jonathan, you beat me to the punch there. I just showed where that was. Good job. And good. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to show is a little bit of let's talk about some weather information. When you're planning a flight across the country, Obviously, a longer flight, the weather is more important. Down here in San Diego and in Southern California, we're pretty lucky with some pretty nice weather. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do it. And I'll show you first just kind of a big picture sort of a thing. You can overlay, for instance, radar on the chart. You come over here to the upper left corner, you tap the chart selecting tool. This is where you select what kind of chart you want to look at. So right now you can see in that left column, I'm looking at the VFR sectional. I can switch it to an IFR low altitude chart, and you can see the chart behind changes over to the IFR low. You can go to an IFR high. You can zoom in too far and get it to where you can't see anything. And let me just touch on another setting in here that I found is very useful for dealing with this chart. Again, if you touch that gear and you bring this down, we're going to look for multiple selections in this layer selector at the bottom. You see I have multiple selections turned on. This was a change. This is something I complained about ForeFlight for years, and they changed this about a year ago. The old setting was this didn't exist. It was always off. And what happens with that is when you pull up this chart selector and say I want to change to the IFR low, so I do that, notice the menu goes away. It changes to the chart, but the menu goes away right away. So what if I wanted to change multiple selections and put on some other overlays? You have to reselect the menu, reselect your new chart, and keep reselecting the menu for everything you want to show. And I just found that kind of tedious. And I said, it'd be really nice if we had a feature where that menu could stay for a while and you can touch multiple selections. And that's what this is. So you turn your multiple selections on. Now, when we pull the chart up, I can change the chart, I can select different options, and the menu stays there until I tap outside of the menu. So I just find that much more useful. So I really recommend you turn that multiple selections on. And when you do that, think of me, because I complained about that for years. They finally fixed it. So for getting a broad picture idea of what's going on in the world weather-wise, one thing I like to look at is we can turn on, just down here, this flight category. And you'll see that over each airport now we get a little green dot. And this is an indication of the weather at that airport. Nice day here in sunny Southern California, isn't it? Green spots everywhere. And green is good. Blue is a little bit less good. It's more like marginal VFR. Then you have red, that's IFR, and pink is really bad. That's low IFR. You can look in the ForeFlight manuals for the descriptions and all that. In fact, let me take another detour back to among the documents you have downloaded and installed on your iPad should be all the ForeFlight documents, but you have to manually make a step to do that. We come back over here to documents and back over here to our catalog, and the next folder down from the FAA is ForeFlight. So I recommend grabbing all of these charts. Looks like I got some updates I need to do. But you've got ForeFlight Mobile Legends, for instance, weather legends. So if you ever have a question on what anything is in any of these imagery that we're going to be looking at here over the next few minutes, make sure you grab this book and you can look it up and see. What does the radar intensity mean? There's 3 different categories for the radar intensity display, depending on whether you're looking at it on the ground over the internet, whether you're looking at it over an ADS-B in data that's in your airplane, or a Sirius XM. You see, especially there at that 35 level, that precipitation at that intensity will show up green in ADS-B, but it'll be yellow either on the internet or on Sirius XM. So slight differences. Here's your mixed rain and snow, what that looks like, snow intensity. And when I'm going to scroll through here a little quicker, I do another entire talk on getting weather data in ForeFlight. So it's beyond the scope of what we have time for today here. But here's our flight category dots. So if you ever wonder what the distinction is on these colors, here it is. So VFR is green, better than 3,005 miles, and so forth. And also you got your winds aloft. Barbs are different colors based on the speed. Surface winds, black, orange, or red, based on different speeds. All this information is in this diagram. And I constantly see questions in pilot forums online in various places. Well, what does this mean? What does that mean? One common one here. I don't want to spend too much time on it. You got reading capability. You have the ability to download this, so get it on your own at some point. Just flip through there, get familiar with it, make sure you know where it is, and then when you have the question, you can dive in and go to that, and you'll know exactly where it is. So as we zoom out on a broader scale, we can start to see some areas with some weather. So look at this, up there in the Central Valley, we've got some low IFR. You can tap on that button and you get the information for that airport. So look at that, a 1/4 mile visibility in Modesto. Hey, what do you know? It's wintertime. We get the Thule fog up there in the valley. So there it is. If you're going to go do your $200 burger run up there, you might have some weather to contend with today. So when you start seeing these blue and pink and red circles, that means that your radar needs to get up, your spidey sense needs to be turned on, and you need to be starting to pay particular attention. If all you see is green dots everywhere, then you got a pretty good idea that the weather's nice. I know we've got a couple East Coast people on here, believe it or not. So yeah, not a bad day there in New England, just a couple of marginals, but largely VFR almost everywhere. Over there in the upper Midwest, what do you know? It's Minneapolis, Chicago. There's some weather up there. I'm shocked. It's probably cold. So if you're going to fly there today, then spend some extra time around the weather briefing and make sure that you are able to contend with whatever weather you've got. So that's one quick way to get a little overview of what's going on. Let's say we get Santa Ana winds here in Southern California every so often. Let's put some surface wind barbs on. In fact, I kind of was thinking this morning, I went out for my run and I thought we might be having just a little bit, it felt kind of dry. So I look at this chart and I don't know how well you can see this, these little wind barbs at these airports. And sure enough, we've got a wind out of the Northeast at Ontario here, out of the east at Brackett, but pretty calm. It's just very light, very mild Santa Ana conditions right now. We can zoom out a bit more here in the Central Valley. Probably not much wind at all because we had that fog, remember? If you have some wind, usually you don't have a lot of fog. So yeah, it looks like pretty light winds everywhere there. So if you're flying in a smaller airplane that can't deal with as much wind, or if you're a wimpy tailwheel pilot like myself, I want wind that's right down the runway. Last time I flew a tailwheel, I used more of the width of the runway than the length of the runway. So I like to have my wind as straight down the runway as I can. So wind might be whatever you're interested in. How about temperature? If you're going to be flying across, say, the Rockies on your way to Oshkosh in the summertime, temperature can be a real issue, especially as you go across the Rockies. Of course, here we are in the middle of winter. It's almost coming up on the solstice here in a couple of days. Yeah. So it's cold. So density altitude is probably not much of an issue for us this time of year, but this is something to watch for. One thing that I would like to see them put on here that I haven't seen yet is I'd really like to see density altitude displayed as one of these selectable overlays. It's not. I've sent the request in, and maybe one day they'll add that feature too. So on top of this now, you can overlay radar. So I want to take just a moment on that. But before I do, I want to show you one thing on this chart, on this menu overlay. You see in that column that says radar, you see a whole bunch of things in that list down there at turbulence, clouds. Below hazard advisor, you'll see a little line horizontally across there. And then you see traffic. And then you see another line, and there's AirMet, SIGMET, Center Weather Advisories, and TFRs. These kind of divides these overlays into groups. And generally speaking, the rule is you can have one thing in that group selected. So right now I've got radar composite selected. I can select lowest tilt. And when I select something new, the old selection goes away. If I select enhanced satellite, it goes away. So one at a time for these things in the group. There is one exception. One of my complaints for a long time about ForeFlight was it's possible to turn your TFR display off. And all the other EFB apps I know, whether it's WingX, Flight Plan Go, anything like this, you cannot turn TFRs off. In ForeFlight, you can. And in fact, when we've had presidential TFRs going around, we turned out The old rule, the old ForeFlight used to work following this rule. You see in this little box, we've got TFRs highlighted now. Now, when I select AirMet, SIGMET, Center Weather Advisories, TFR stays on. In the old days, TFR would turn off. So if you had it selected, you would inadvertently turn the TFR display off, and you could be flying along and not realize that you're about to enter a TFR. And we had people get into trouble with that. So now they made it so that it doesn't accidentally turn TFRs off. You have to manually turn it off if you don't want to see it. And I'm not sure why you do that. But generally speaking, within these boxes, you turn something on, it turns something else off. So just keep that in mind. Same thing over in that left column with the chart type you're selecting. You can't look at a sectional chart at the same time that you look at a low chart. And you can't look at a low chart at the same time you look at a high chart. Let me turn that satellite off. Well, that's kind of confusing there when you get the side panel overlay and then you get the numbers over the airports for whatever it is. So, but most of us are going to be using the VFR sectional, and you'll have one of these displayed for whatever your concern is today. Here in the upper Midwest, remember that we saw a lot of marginals and some reds as far as the flight category. And now we're taking a look in here, and this, I happen to have visibility selected. So those green boxes are all good visibility, better than 5 miles. The blue boxes are visibility between 3 and 5, so marginal VFR. The reds are IFR, so less than 3, and the magentas are low IFR, less than 1. So sure enough, and as we zoom in on that, so you can start to see that in this area, this region, we've got some reduced visibility. And over on the east side of that, southeast side of the screen, we've got even lower than that. We've got some IFR and low IFR weather. We can also look at ceiling the same way. Same deal, look at that. We've got some greens that weather's above 5,000 feet. Blues are between 5 and 2, I think, or 1 and 5, I believe, whatever the number was in that other book I showed you a moment ago. So the color code instantly tells you, go toward the green if you can. If you got red and pink and maybe even blue to contend with, then you need to spend some extra time. So let me turn that one off. And one of the most important overlays here that you can possibly use for your flight planning is all the way down at the bottom of this list, your fuel 100 low lead. Let's watch that populate. You tell me that's not an important flight planning piece of data here. The price of fuel, and it's color coded. So you're flying around and you got to make a fuel stop. Maybe you're looking for something right about here in the middle of the screen. Don't go to the orange or the red where the fuel's expensive. Go to the green where it's cheap. Look at that, $3.45 a gallon. Where is that? Kelly. I've never even heard of it. Got no idea where that is, but they got cheap fuel. So that might be where you want to go. So with some judicious use of this feature, you might even be able to pay for your ForeFlight subscription right out of this. So think about that. Okay, so that's kind of broad picture overlay weather information. Let me turn that off and we'll simplify our chart a little bit. I'll put on the flight category again, and I want to talk about the radar for a bit. So this is going to download and soon show us some radar data. Oh, here we go. So, ooh, bad day there in East Texas, it looks like. We got some weather going on. Here's the DFW area there in the upper left corner of the screen. So yeah, we got some weather going on here. We got some reduced visibilities and altitude. We got some convection going on. We got some lightning even going on down there. We got some serious weather. And a couple things I want to talk about here. You can see these barbs, these strings of dots. This is a prediction based on the information that the ForeFlight weather gurus have. This is a prediction on where they think this storm is moving. So, boy, I wish I had a highlighter here. If I had an Apple Pen or something, I could probably highlight something on the screen. But right at the middle of the screen here, you see 2 red dots, and below that is a line that goes out toward the northeast. The storm right now, that section of the storm that's at the lower left corner of that is moving in the northeast corner. And each of those dots is where they predict that weather is going to be in 20 minutes from now, 40 minutes from now, and 60 minutes from now. So that's their projection on where the storm is going. You see in the upper, we just got it. I was just going to point out in the very upper left corner of the screen, now it says 10:35 PST. That's the time that this data was generated. The time right now is 10:40, 10:39. This data was gathered and computed and formatted for display and sent out to us about 4 minutes ago. It just changed. Just before that change, it said 10:30. So this gets updated about every 5 minutes. Now, really important point that I want to make sure, if you remember nothing else from this talk today, I want you to remember this. This data is old. It was sent to us, it was gathered and prepared for transmission 5 minutes ago. Now we're looking at it on our screen. But it took upwards of 20 minutes to create that data, to scan the radar devices all around, gather the data, correlate it all, put it in one place, do some adjustments and refinements on that data and prepare it. That process takes upwards of 15 minutes. So what I'm trying to say is, this is not where this weather is. This is where this weather was as much as 20 minutes ago, and a prediction about where it's going. So never use this data in flight to make a decision about trying to fly through an area of weather. And what I'll point out right here is, here's an area with a gap. You see that we got the red zone just in the middle of the screen and a gap with yellow, and then another red zone in the upper right. You might be tempted to want to fly through that. But remember, I said this is old data. That's where the weather was, not where the weather is. And you can see that line indicating where it's moving, where they think it's going to move over the next 20 minutes, 40 minutes, and 60 minutes. So if you're looking at flying through there, that's where that section that was there 20 minutes ago is going to be in 40 minutes. You just don't know how it's going to change and move. So this is a strategic tool only, not a tactical tool. You might be able to use it to make a decision about where you're going to divert. You might look at this weather and decide, I'm going to divert to some airport on the north side of that, although I see a whole bunch of low IFR. Maybe that weather's not so great behind the storm for a little bit. We've got greens on the southeast side of it. So, maybe that's something, if you were coming from the south here, you'd stop at one of those and wait for the weather to clear out of your way before you move on. Now, another thing you can do is you can put this weather in motion. Down here at the bottom of the screen, you see this bar with it says December 19 and 10:35, and then this bar. And that's showing you this, that blue dot is the weather that was 7 minutes ago. So right now the time is 10:42. This data was gathered at 10:35. It tells us in the upper left corner. So this is the 7 minutes ago. If you want to look at the 12 minutes ago, you can just move this bar. So this is where it was 5 minutes before that, 5 minutes before that, and so on. And you can kind of look at it progressing, or you can just tap that play button on the left side of that bar, and it's going to download all this data, and you can see that storm moving over about the last hour. You can watch, it shows you the time there, it's 10:30, 35. It starts at 9:50. So this is showing us the weather movement over the last hour. So this again is a nice strategic tool. You can look at this and kind of get an idea for where the weather is moving and avoid it. Land early or go a different direction, deviate across your route. But I can't caution this strongly enough. Don't go through this line based on the weather you see from here. If you don't have onboard radar with a radar antenna out on your wing or in your nose, don't try to penetrate this weather. So hopefully I'm saying that strongly enough for you. Okay, let's see, what else have we got? Yeah, no green dots in the Pacific Northwest. Let's take a look at that. Wow, and I saw some weather moving in there. Yep. I got a couple of green dots there, but you see this weather moving in just off of the west side of the Olympic Peninsula there. You guys are going to get it. And let's see, Peter's saying, yeah, the AOPA talks about this a lot. I talk about it. Everybody else who teaches ForeFlight and ADS-B information will tell you the same thing with this. It is old data. It is fatal. About one time a year on average right now, we get somebody trying to penetrate a line and the airplane disassembles itself. It has, to use Elon Musk's terminology, it has a rapid unscheduled disassembly, and somebody dies out of it. And when they put the pieces together afterwards. They'll compare what information the pilot might have had with ADS-B versus what was available through a ground-based terrestrial antenna. And they'll see that, oh, the pilot was going through what he saw as the weakest part of the storm, but in reality, in the real-time radar showed that that was actually the pinkest part, the worst part of that storm, and it's just not usable. So please don't do that. Okay, it looks like we're up to date with that. Please repeat how to see the TAC chart legend. Okay, let me just hit that one real quick for you, Harry. Go to your settings here and scroll down. We're going to go to the map touch action, and you're going to select bring chart to front with legends. And now say we're going to zoom in on the Seattle area over here. We touch this chart and we change to the sectional chart. Actually, you have to be zoomed in enough. Still not zoomed in enough. Come on, Seattle, show it to me. There we go. Here's the TAC chart. You can scroll, and let me turn this radar off here so we can see it better. Scroll over to the side now, and you can see the side panel data. And that's not just TAC charts, actually. It's also works for a sectional chart. You know, in the old days with the paper sectionals, you would have a list of, say, the restricted areas and so forth off on the side. This works also with sectional charts. So all that data is still there. You just have to turn that map touch action to bring chart to front with legends. That's how you find this data. So hopefully that takes care of your question. All right, so weather overlays. So this information is all real good, real useful. We can come down here and zoom in a bit. If you see one of these dots you want to look at, we're looking at Portland right now, tap on the airport dot there, and it's going to bring up a box with specific information about that airport. And it takes you generally over to the weather page. So here's your weather, the current METAR weather for Portland, which is 15 minutes old. Yeah, it was out at 1831. So, I mean, we got up to the minute information here almost. Here's your decoded version at the top, and then you can scroll down and you can read that's the encoded version at the top. That I prefer to read, and then you can see the decoded version, and then you can see nearby weather. So we're marginal at Portland, but everything around it is IFR or low IFR. Well, Aurora's pretty good. That's probably far enough east, it's out of the weather. All right, so that's your weather information. And while this is all very valuable, very useful information in the flight planning context, this does not constitute what many would call a legal weather briefing. And so the constant question I get is, where do you get your legal weather in ForeFlight? And I'm going to touch on another source of weather information in here, but what we're going to do is I'm going to put a short flight in here. We're going to fly from Brownfield to Long Beach, and you'll see why I picked that one in just a little bit. That's a nice little flight. I'm not sure I'd go there for the $200 hamburger. There's nothing convenient on the airport, but just for our planning purposes here, we'll talk about how to get a weather briefing. And the way you do the legal weather briefing, with the air quotes around it, is you tap inside this flight plan box. Right now you see edit is kind of highlighted there. You see the little suitcase with the exclamation point on it. Two icons to the right of that is a little square box with an arrow going out of it. I call that the send to button. And we're going to send this flight to flights. And this is going to open that flights tab down at the bottom, and it's going to take our flight plan data that we told it we were going to do, this Brownfield to Long Beach. It's going to assume whichever airplane I told it, which I have my 182 in there. And we can review this data. We're going to fly on December 19th. We're going to take off at, say, 11 a.m. PST. We're going to fly from Brown to Long Beach. IFR, well, let's do this one VFR. So we'll change that. Route direct cruise altitude. I don't think I'm going to do that at 38,000 feet in my 182. That was for the Hawaii flight the other day. Let's say we do it. It's a westbound, so I'm sorry, northwestbound. I will pick. We'll pick 6,500 feet, and the rest of it we'll just let ride. What I want to show you is how to get this weather briefing. And we put all that data in, just do a quick double check for sanity on it, make sure the numbers are all right. and tap briefing. And this briefing now is going to go out onto the internet. You have to have a good solid internet connection, whether it's Wi-Fi or cell data. And it's going to grab this weather briefing and it's going to display it to you. So we've gone away from a lot of the text briefing that we've had for years and years in aviation. We're finally going to a more graphical depiction. So this is the graphical depiction of the vertical cross section. So this is a profile view of your route. We're flying from Brownfield. We're going to climb up to almost 7,000 feet, and we're going to start our descent. We got the terrain down there, and notice it shows you that first couple miles of the flight are all going to be inside terrain. Well, it's not just specifically where you are, but it's within a corridor around your route that there is terrain. But this is going to show us the wind. So right now, pretty much the entire way, we're going to have a wind out of the south at about 10 knots. Some spots are 5 knots or 15 knots. We don't have a triple pause on here, or we're flying low altitude. Okay, here's your wind temperature and turbulence at 6,500 feet. We're going to have a nice smooth flight today. Look at that. There's no indication of any kind of turbulence. You got your wind there. It's +8 degrees. Nice day. Significant weather. So we do have a little lined area here that is, you can see that little B and the lower part of the chart there. It happens to overlay where we're going to be. And on the upper left corner of the chart, you see this legend. Area B says it's going to be light turbulence between 31,000 and 44,000. So very high altitude, light turbulence, nothing for us to be concerned about along our flight. Sometimes you'll see other areas here, especially in the coming up here in the spring. In about another 4 or 5 months, we have the marine layer that comes by in the morning. You'll see a different kind of a scalloped area there that will have low stratus clouds. And you'll see a little box there with the altitudes and some more details on that. Now we turn to our METARs along the route. You got your departure and destination airports along the way. And you got each one shows the METAR and then the TAF. And again, the green colored dots that color codes the weather conditions you'll have at that point. And then we come down here to your SIGMETs and AirMets. Really nothing that's going to apply to us. Then we got our NOTAMs. Don't forget the NOTAMs. I got bit by a NOTAM the other day going out of LAX. Kind of made for an interesting day. And I prefer the undecoded, the encoded version, just because it's easier for me to read. Your mileage may vary, and I'll show you in just a moment how you can change that. But recent NOTAMs, so we've got down there at Brownfield, airspace PJE, WI, and area. What's that mean? You probably are familiar with these abbreviations. PJE means parachute jumping exercise. So there's an area defined as a half-a-mile radius from the airport. So you have a skydiving operation going on the airport. Departure information. So we got a little airspace. We got a SID. There's the Oceanside TACAN is out of service. We got some modifications to approach procedures at Brownfield. Not a big deal for us today because it's VFR. We're going to Long Beach, and notice we've got a couple taxiway closure NOTAMs. So I'm going to come back to that in just a minute and show you a very powerful tool to use with this information to smooth your operation when you get there and make sure you don't go any wrong directions. By the way, thanks very much for the mug from last time I was down there. And I use it when I'm doing these talks. These are awesome. Thanks very much for that. So all your NOTAMs are down here. You peruse these as you like. Again, I prefer the encoded version. I can read them a lot quicker. I especially like that ForeFlight will highlight certain things that are significant for you. In our case, it's highlighting all this US, unserviceable. So you can see at Orange County, for instance, the ILS 20 right glide path is unserviceable. So if you're going to be doing an ILS into Orange County Airport today, or whatever those dates are, boy, it looks like that's for quite a while, from right now until first week in January, you won't be able to do the ILS approach. You'll have to do the localizer or the LDA or an RNAV approach instead. So it highlights things of significance, runway closures and that sort of thing. Here we've got some stuff closed down there at MMTJ. I guess that's probably Tijuana, I think. And these are Mexican NOTAMs, so they don't follow the format. And that's why we get all this unrecognized NOTAM type. Not really much of an issue for us because we're going north, we're not going south. And that's the data. Okay, so this was a graphical briefing. And here's the key thing I want to show you. When I get this graphical briefing, you can save this in such a way that you can go back and view it in your airplane in flight. The old ForeFlight, as of about a year and a half ago, I didn't know of a way that I could save this briefing and then go back and review these NOTAMs in flight. But now in the upper right corner, you see that same little square box with the arrow pointing up, that send to button. And you can send this a lot of places. You can print it, you can text it, you can email it, you can copy it, you can save it to ForeFlight documents. So that's what I like to do. So boom, hey, it saved it into my ForeFlight documents. Now we can come back over across the bottom of the screen. We have that row of icons. You have the documents as the fourth from left. We can look back at this and let's find this document. In the My Drive section on the left-hand side, under the green new binder, just below that is imported. So these are documents that I have gotten from elsewhere. You can see here, I've got a parts manual for my airplane. I've got some user manuals, maintenance manuals for different equipment. Scroll down to the bottom of this list now. And, oop, it didn't put it there. I put some, where's my weather briefing? It should be in here. Oh, flight plans, form. Oh, it hid it for, here we go. Sometimes you have to search around for it. Left-hand side there says briefing, SDM to KLGB. That's the briefing we're just looking at. So you can come back in flight and review this data in case you had some questions. You wanted to go back and look at the NOTAMs again, the METARs and TAFs and so forth. This is how you can get to that information. So let's come back over here to flights. Now there's several different formats of briefing that you can get. This is a particular method I found lately that I like a lot. But if we come over here, and now we're going to go to the global ForeFlight settings. And the way you get to that is over in the lower right corner, that same strip of buttons on the bottom of the screen. You see that more, the three lines in the more. We're going to tap that. And in the upper right of this box, you see settings. Tap on settings, and this is all the settings within ForeFlight, including some that we saw on that other gear thing. But what I want to show you here is we're going to scroll down here, multiple map annotations checklist, blah, 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 whether flights. In this flights section, briefing format, and I've requested a graphical PDF. You can also look at a graphical HTML or the old style classic text. So if we wanted to look, say, at the old style classic text briefing, and we close the settings, we come back over here, now we're in flights again, tap briefing, say, hey, look at that, there's a new briefing available. Actually, it's saying it's unavailable because we're leaving too soon. This flight leaves in 2 minutes. It leaves at 11 a.m. I'm going to set this for noon for next hour because this meeting is going to go on for another 40 minutes, so we won't be able to fly anyway till then. Okay, so we'll get a new briefing. Yeah, go get me a briefing, why don't you? Let's try resetting that. Okay, it's retrieving briefing. You can see it working down there at the bottom. It's going to take it a couple of moments, and now ForeFlight is going out to the ForeFlight servers and grabbing all the data. And this is the old style briefing. Now you got your text METAR data from your departure airport, closest terminal weather and NOTAMs for your departure and your destination, and then TFRs along the way. We got our Disneyland TFR we know about, nothing else. You can scroll down here. So all these are, you do have some graphical stuff, but it's the old style, mostly the old style classic text briefing that we've come to know and love over the last, whatever, 60, 70 years. This particular representation of the data, I haven't found a way to save this anywhere. So that's part of why I like the graphical PDF version, is I can save that as a document and then come back and refer to it later. Yeah, okay, so Craig was asking about my weather briefing looks completely different from his, and the reason is probably he has something different selected in this briefing format. So depending on which briefing format you have selected here is the kind of briefing you're going to get. So yep, that's it, Craig, good. Answering questions, you set them up, I'll knock them down. So this weather briefing that we're looking at is a legal briefing. And the only distinction between this and all the other really important weather information we've been looking at is with this briefing, my tail number is associated with this. So there's a record that I got a briefing at this time on this day for this flight from this airport to that airport. And so if I wrap it up into a ball at the other end and they're trying to pick up the pieces and figure out what happened, part of this will show. They're going to go to the ForeFlight servers and say, did he get a weather briefing? And they're going to see my tail number associated with this data. And they're going to know that I fulfilled my responsibilities in obtaining all available information for the flight, including this weather briefing. All the other information is great, but there's no record that you got it. There's no record that I tapped on this button and looked at the weather information. Nobody knows that but you. So it's just a part of that. And that's what I consider to be a legal briefing. There is no definition of what a legal briefing is, but my definition basically is you've gotten all available information. Okay. Now, if you remember a moment ago when we were looking at Long Beach, we saw a couple of NOTAMs for taxiways. And here's something I want to show you. I've done a little remedial training for a couple of guys that got into trouble with some of these. And what I've done now is over on the lower left corner, that bottom strip of buttons again, on the very left-hand side of that is the airports button. And I use this button a lot. I probably use it more than most ForeFlight pilots do. And I would encourage you to kind of experiment and maybe consider starting to use it a little bit more too. It's kind of a one-stop shop for all these airports information. It's a bigger screen. My eyes are getting a little more tired these days. So I like things a little bit more dedicated. So what I want to show you here is the taxiway diagram. First is we pick our airport. So on the left-hand side, I've got favorites selected. I can look at recents or I can browse around, look at different airports. So recents is going to be all the airports that you've done a search on or reviewed in the last period of time. And notice also it's showing the weather information and those same little dots along the side that give you just a one quick peek. Yeah, it's VFR weather there. In the favorites now, these are airports that you have made a favorite airport. So what do I mean by that? I'll show you. Over here at recents, let me take a look at Camarillo, let's say. And the very top of the screen, just above the KCMA Camarillo and just a little bit left is that white star. If I look over at this favorite section, now, if you tap that white star, it turns gold. And notice that Camarillo now shows up in my list of favorite airports. So if I'm flying from a point A to a point B, I want to have at least my departure and my destination listed as favorite airports. I might also want my alternate airport, both a departure alternate and a destination alternate. And I might even want some airports along the way. But I don't want every airport I've ever been to. I've seen people that have favorites list that you have to scroll down for days because this is an airport they went to one day or they looked at it and they made it a favorite. And now they got so many favorites. And you know, if you have more than one kid, it's like the favorite kid. Well, which kid's your favorite? And you have to be magnanimous and you say, well, I love all my kids the same, right? Well, if you love them all the same, pretty soon you don't love any of them. But so I want you to love only the ones you're using today. So we're flying, I'm not flying to Fullerton, so I can just swipe left on that and delete it. I'm not flying to Orange County. I can swipe left and delete it. I'm going from Brownfield to Long Beach. I want those. And you know, let's just leave Camarillo in there for my alternate, let's say. Much better food at Camarillo than at Long Beach. So destination is Long Beach. Take a couple of minutes to do this, especially if it's an airport that you're not familiar with. Maybe you haven't been there in a long time, or critically, maybe they're working on the airport. There's a construction project going on. So let's talk about that a little bit. In the upper right corner, you see these 4 boxes, 3D view, FBOs, taxiways, and comments. I'm going to tap on that taxiways. And this is where you go to get yourself familiar with the airport. You can see I've kind of cheated here already and kind of marked a little bit on here. But I really like this about ForeFlight. If you've got a live internet connection, while you're looking at this diagram, your application has gone to the ForeFlight servers and it says, you got some NOTAMs that apply to this chart, to this airport. And it shows you that big red flag right there, tap to view 6 NOTAMs. So let's take a look at these. So we've got a taxiway NOTAM, taxiway Bravo, work in progress, construction adjacent to the east edge excavation, taxi speed 9 knots, lighted and barricaded. Wow, that's a mouthful and a half. So we're going to look at taxiway Bravo on the east edge. So let's look around here a little bit. Here's taxiway Bravo, is north-south taxiway on the west side of the airport. It goes through a couple of hot spots there. So I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to give it a yellow highlight that's kind of a little big and about half opacity. And I can draw this line. I'm just going to draw it right down that whole taxiway. So that's a reminder that if I'm taxiing in that area, I'm going to want to take extra notice for this work in progress construction adjacent to the east edge of that. Okay, we've got another one here, taxiway Bravo between Kilo and Juliet, now 60 feet wide. Okay, that's great. My airplane's 36.5 feet wide, no problem. Taxiway Bravo between K and J, we've got construction. So Bravo between, I see J. I don't see Kilo. Where's taxiway Kilo? They're hiding it. Sometimes it's a real Easter egg hunt to try to find these things. So we've got some construction going on somewhere around here. We don't really know where. And let's see. Taxiway Bravo between runway 1230 and Kilo is closed. So while it's not marked, I think it's going to be somewhere in the upper left there. So it's completely closed. So this one, I'm going to give it a red marker, completely opaque, and I don't want it quite that big. I'll make it 7 points wide. And this taxiway is closed somewhere up there. So I'm going to mark that. Now that's basically permanently marked on my taxi diagram. I can go about my business. I can look at my charts. We can fly the whole flight. When we land in Long Beach and the taxiway diagram gets automatically displayed after you slow down on the runway for landing, it's going to take us here back over to the taxi diagram, and I'm already going to have that marked. So this should be part of your flight planning to contemplate any construction going on in the airport, taxiway closures, signage issues, lighting issues, anything like that. If you mark it on the chart when you're at home in the comfort of your office preparing for the flight, now you'll have that information ready for you at the touch of a button, actually automatically for you when you land at your destination. Now you see these other markings here, the green markings. This is, I was flying with a client out of there at a gorgeous Bravo, a Mooney Bravo. It's my first time in a Bravo, but we were flying, he's based out of Long Beach. When I got a taxi clearance, I gave myself a green pen, and I made it kind of medium opacity there. And he hangers out of here. So I said, well, I am expecting my taxi route to be that. Now you get your clearance from ground and you can just mark even the taxi route that you've been given. You can see here, I've already marked off of Golf down taxiway Delta and hold short at 26 left. That was the taxi clearance you've got. So this is another way you could mark up a taxi diagram. And I did some remedial training with a guy who flew into Orange County in an airplane, and he didn't go through all this stuff, and he got himself in a little bit of trouble, made some wrong turns at the airport. Worst part of it was he ended up damaging his airplane and getting some remedial training, and I got involved with that at that point. But there were some of these tools that he didn't have fully dialed in. So it's a great idea to make sure you got this all figured out before you get there. Okay. On Long Beach Airport here, the last thing I want to show you, if you're looking at this procedure tab, you can see we've got airport, departure, arrival, approach, and other. So here's all the approaches you have available there. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. What I want to show you is on the airport, this construction notice tab. This is a fairly new feature just in the last year or so. And these are new diagrams that have come out from the FAA for most airports that have long-term construction projects going on. So you can see here, they've marked up some of these taxiways are closed with X's. We've got that A in the circle there. Just points at that taxiway Bravo. Oh, there's Kilo, is the north side parallel taxiway. So that little letter A says there's more information about that taxiway closure. And if we scroll down to the bottom of the list, you'll see here box A says, this is the NOTAM number, taxiway Bravo between 12:30 and taxiway Kilo is closed. It says that starts on November 19th, 2020 and finishes on February 1st, 2021. So this gives you some idea of how long this closure is going to be valid for. So this is another great thing to review, especially if you're going into a busy airport that's got a lot of work going on, especially if you're going to go to someplace like, let's say, Chino. Chino has been in the news a lot in the GA world, safety world, because this is the current hotspot in the country for runway incursions and taxiway violations, this sort of thing. A lot of pilots are making mistakes here at Chino. In fact, the runway safety team made a video that's available on the FAA website on these issues at Chino. You combine the fact that it's a very busy training airport with a lot of foreign-speaking pilots coming in and doing their pilot training, with a control tower that's got a lot of new controllers and a very complex airport diagram, airport runway layout, with some visibility issues, some very old pavement, very old paint, and very hard signs to see. And it makes for a recipe for disaster. One of the things I don't like about these diagrams is you can see these hotspots. There's really not a lot of information here on what these hotspots mean. It's just a circle on the airport. You know there's something going on there, but what really is the issue? And the main issue here at Chino happens to be between hotspot 2 and hotspot 4. And I've been right through here myself just in the last, about 2 months ago. I landed on runway 26 left and we exited at Lima. And we're going to taxi up here basically to where the tower is. So you can see we've got to exit at Lima, hold short of the diagonal runway. We're going to get a clearance across, and there's a crown in that runway. So as you start your taxi there, you can't see really on the other side of that. And what people are doing is they tend to turn on runway 3 instead of continuing over to taxiway Lima and making the turn on Delta that they meant to make. So how do you get to that hotspot information? And if you come back to the airport diagram in that same section, airport section, down at the bottom is hotspot. That takes you to the FAA hotspot information. And we can zoom in here on Chino, and this tells you where it is. Now here's one, I'll give you a good point. If you want to spend the extra money and subscribe to Jeppesen charts instead, they have much better information on the hotspots than the government charts do. In this case, it just tells you hotspot 4 is at taxiway Lima, Delta, and Kilo. It's a complex intersection. And that's what we were just looking at a moment ago. There's a bunch of diagonals, there's perpendiculars, there's runway crossings, diagonal runways. That's a complex intersection. So if you find yourself taxiing at an airport into an area that's labeled as a hotspot, that should be a big clue bird to you talking into your head that you need to pay all attention to what's going on with your airplane. Go slow, make sure you know where you're going. If you're not sure where you're going, stop the airplane and tell ground that you're lost and you need some help, and they'll give it to you. Now, somebody else just mentioned the taxiway diagram and the aeronautical map. This is the official FAA diagram. This one is the ForeFlight diagram, which can also be useful. So again, you see your hotspots are highlighted here, and used to be, I was thinking they just changed, there was some change that ForeFlight just made on these hotspots in the last week or so. And frankly, I haven't had the time to explore that to see, but here your hotspots are highlighted, and yeah, there's really no way to get more information on it. But yes, there's lots of different kinds of taxiway diagrams. Use the one you're familiar with. Some airports might have a ForeFlight diagram where there isn't an FAA diagram. So a smaller airport will tend to be in a situation like that. So that's about all I had prepared. Wow, that took a bit longer than I was thinking. Do we have any other questions that haven't already been posted in the chat line there? How do you want to do this, Carrie?
I think let me put out a call to the floor. If you have further questions, put them in the chat box there, and we'll pick them up from there.
I did see a question pop in there about the logbook. And I'll be quite honest, I don't use the logbook a whole lot in ForeFlight. I've been using my flight book for years, and for both my my GA flying and my Part 121 flying. I use that a lot, but let me just briefly show you. So here are the entries some of the entries that have shown up in my logbook, and this is not by any stretch all the flying I've done this year. So you can add a new entry over here in the upper left corner. There is a plus. You can create a new entry. You can log in here and, departure, destination, Hobbs, clock time, all this kind of thing. Your total time, PIC time, and so forth, cross country and so forth. One of the handy things that I do use with this, with some of my clients who use this logbook, is you can add an instructor signature. So if you don't keep a paper logbook anymore, and there's really no requirement that you have to keep a paper logbook, so more people are going to this electronic logbook. Let's say you come to me and we do an IPC, and you need the endorsement for an IPC. We can request the signature from this flight, and it goes to your box here. You can pick your instructor. Let me see. I just saw Jay Mason's one of my instructor friends, so I want to have him. It'll email him a request to sign your logbook, so you can do that. And tags. We can tag this, and we can say this was an IPC. Okay, so when it sends the email to him, it's going to present this logbook information, and he'll see that and say, okay, yes, I did an IPC with him. I certify that Mr. Michael C. Jesh, airline transport pilot number, yada, yada, has successfully completed an instrument proficiency check of 6157, blah, 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 and put it all in there. So that's handy, and this is a legal record of your logbook. If you ever needed to send this anywhere, I thought there was a way to export the logbook. Again, I don't use this feature a whole lot, so I'm not as deft with it as I would like to be. So hopefully that's a little touch, and maybe next time around I'll have a chance to get in and study this a little bit more. Okay, let me see. Got a question from Harry, asks whether the street map is available in flight, and let me show you what he's talking about. We come here to the chart and we turn on the street map instead. And this is a case where you have two different charts at the same time. ForeFlight is going to prioritize the sectional chart. So we're going to have to turn the sectional chart off to see this. Now we can zoom in and you can see there's the airport. Here's your streets around the area. You got the border right down there across the street. We all know about that. So it's kind of handy information, but his question is, can you see this in flight? And the answer is no, because it needs to get this data live from the internet while it's looking at it. And only in very rare circumstances are you going to have this available in flight. So you're going to need to go look at your Google map before you go and find out where the restaurant is that you're going to walk to before you fly, because you won't be able to see it once you get in the air. That does bring up here. Let me turn this radar composite back on. If you're looking at the sectional chart and you're looking at this radar over here, you might notice that sometimes it's hard to get your bearings on exactly where that weather is. There's so much chart information there that it kind of gets lost. So for instance, where are the state boundaries? It's hard to tell using this map. So here's a tip for you. What I like to do is turn off the sectional layer, turn off all the layers. So now you're looking at the map and you just have the state outlines. So this might help you build the bigger picture about where that weather really is. Okay, Mitch, every time to activate my VFR flight plan lately, it doesn't work. And we did have a couple other flight plan information. So let's take a look at that. Down at the bottom of the screen there, back to that flights tab. We're still looking at our weather briefing. So let's come back to the flights information here. If we want to file this flight plan, we've reviewed all this information. It's all correct. Let's say this flight's leaving at 12. That's in 40 minutes from now. Over on the lower left corner, you see that proceed to file tap this button. It gives you one more chance to review this. We're going to file an ICAO flight plan, a VFR, general aviation. Here's all our data. I've already programmed in my aircraft data, so it knows about all that. There's one person on board. Now we're going to make it a group effort today. There's 3 of us on board, so we have all our information. We're going to go to Long Beach, survival gear if you want. You just tap that file button down there. Do you really want to file this leaving 40 minutes from now? File it. Yep. So it says, I'm filing the flight plan. Your flight plan is filed. That's how you file a flight plan. Easy. And by the way, this is one reason why, if I have an option, I like to get an iPad that has cell data available. And the reason is now you can do this at an airport in the middle of nowhere with using the cell data. You don't need to have a Wi-Fi connection to do this. So now this flight plan is ready to activate or amend it or cancel the whole thing if we decide we're not going to go. So let's say we need to amend it. We're going to change our departure time. Let's say, so we're not leaving at 12 o'clock. We're leaving at, say, 12:30. That's good enough. Be careful with those buttons at the top. There's a close and a now, so you can reset. You can make it now, so it takes the next option 15 minutes from now and plugs that in there. Well, I don't want to leave then. I want to leave at, say, at 12:30. Make sure you hit the close and not the now. Okay, file changes. I want to amend that. It's amending the flight plan. Done. So the new flight plan is on file, departing a little over an hour from now. As far as activating the flight plan, one of the questions that came in is they have a hard time activating the flight plan. Lately, it doesn't work. Well, one way to do it is just touch that activate button. You get this little menu. Do you want to activate this flight plan with flight services? The estimated arrival time will be this. Yep, that's good. Okay, now, don't forget you've activated the flight plan. As far as air traffic control is concerned, I am taking off in my airplane right now. If I don't do anything, they're going to come looking for me in about 45 minutes when I don't show up at Long Beach. They're trying to figure out where I am. So a couple things I do is, one, I take my watch off of my left wrist and I put it on my right wrist when I have an open VFR flight plan. This is weird to me. I don't like having a watch on my right wrist. So it's a constant reminder that something unusual is going on. Why is my watch on my right wrist? And it's because I have an open flight plan. That's a reminder, constant reminder to me to remember to close my flight plan. So we fly along, we land there. When I get to the destination, all I have to do is come back to this flights page. Oh, and by the way, notice that flights tab at the bottom now has that red circle with the 12 in it. That means there's 12 messages concerning this flight that it wants to tell me about. So we scroll back to the top of this page, you can see that 12 new messages. Look in there. It's given us all sorts of updated information on all these NOTAMs going on in the area. So it's really doing a good job trying to keep me up to date about this flight. If I looked in my email inbox, I would also have been emailed a weather briefing. So they're throwing all this information at you, and frankly, it can be kind of a problem. You get all this information. What's really the important information? What do I need to know? So it's reminding you it's there. You can go look at it if you want to. But we're going to jump in the airplane. We go flying. We land at Long Beach. Now we're ready to close the flight plan. We just come back over here to this page and that little black close button over there. We tap that close. We want to close the flight plan. Yes. It says closing flight plan is closed. Now I take my watch off of my right wrist. I put it back over there where it belongs on my left wrist. And that's my reminder that everything's good. So that's just my personal technique on how to do that. Somebody did say they had a hard time activating the VFR flight plan. So if you can be a bit more specific, maybe unmute yourself and talk about what's happening with that, why it's not working. One person, a tip on keeping your iPad cool. Yeah, especially in the summertime. Sometimes that's a problem. I did that as call it a rookie mistake. I was coming home from Denver one time and stopped in Kanab, Utah for fuel. And I was solo on this leg. I put my iPad on my iPhone on the right seat. I take off. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon in June, and headed direct back to Fullerton. And I look down at my iPad and it's overheated. So one way is to get yourself a mount that has fans in it. Xnaut makes one. I think there's another company that makes a fan-cooled iPad holder. Great idea if you can afford that, or plug it into the airplane for power or battery power, whatever you do. One guy I know keeps a bag of frozen peas in an ice chest. If his iPad gets too hot, he just puts it on the bag of peas for a little while, and that helps cool it down. There really is no other solution. You have to increase the airflow and get it to cool down. You can prevent it with some of this. If you've got an air vent, maybe you can point an air vent at it to help cool it a little bit. Just kind of a problem. Okay, okay, I just showed the filing the flight plan. Okay, some other issues there from Jeff on opening and closing might be a data connectivity. That's usually it. If you wait until after takeoff to open your flight plan, it might not be available because you don't have a decent internet connection often when you're in flight. So my technique is opening a VFR flight plan. I just open it right before I take off. And as I look at the time en route here, down here, where's the flight time? It's got the ETE at the top there, but you can't edit it there. I basically just pad that departure time a little bit, the flight time, make sure I have plenty of time to remember to close it at the other end. So hopefully that answers that one. 5G, the bane of aviation in the world. I don't know. I like having data available. I'm a data kind of guy, so I like it. So let's see, what else you got, Carrie? Okay, here's a good question. Somebody asked, the bottom of flights page is a pack tab. What does that do? So what we're talking about is, you see here in the flight plan, it has that little exclamation point in that red circle, the exclamation point. That means there's some more information that we need to have. And we tap on that button, it brings down our flight planning button. For one thing, it says one error in this. What does it says? Oh, short route, don't go up to 38,000 feet. If you remember on the flights page, I told it we were going to fly at 6,500 feet. That doesn't backfeed to this page. So this page still thinks I'm flying at 38,000 feet. So I have to come over here, and I'm telling it a VFR or westerly. So it gives me these altitudes. Notice also, it says at this altitude, I'm going to have this much headwind, and it's going to take this time and that fuel. And it's almost the same on all of those because the wind is so light. So pick that. That makes the error go away. And on the bottom of this box is that little suitcase with the exclamation point. That's the pack button. And here's what's going on with that. Tap on that. It says, okay, based on the information you fed me, I need some more data to download. Here's what I'd like to get. I'd like to go update the weather, airmets, sigmets, fuel prices, and all that stuff. You can tap the pack button, and ForeFlight now goes to the ForeFlight servers and grabs all this data for this flight and a radius around it. You see that little racetrack around the route from Brown to Long Beach? It's going to look at all the airports and stations inside that circle and get me the information that goes with that. You'll notice also it's downloading the 3D view aerial imagery. That's a feature at the highest subscription level, the Performance Plus. I upgraded mine last year, so I'd have all the features. That's not available in the medium, the $200 version, and the $100 version. So it's still grabbing the weather. So this is making sure that you have all the latest data. If you aren't the kind of a pilot who downloads all the charts, all the terminal information, everything that's downloadable into your ForeFlight, which I don't recommend that as a practice, this will go and make sure that you have all the information. Oh, just have another update on the 3D aerial imagery, and maybe I'll touch on that in a second if we have a minute. So this has grabbed all this data, and especially you see it grabbed weather data. So is that considered a legal briefing? And again, the answer is no, because your tail number is not associated with this data. But now that little pack goes away, and any data you look at on here, we look at the Long Beach, let's say the TAF, it makes sure that you have the latest information for all the airports along your route of flight and all the procedures. If we want to look at the approach procedures, let's say this RNAV, we can't do an RNP approach. We're going to look at that GPS approach. we've got all the latest data. We've got an RNAV, we've got a NOTAM for this one. So if I was going to do this flight IFR, I would look at that NOTAM and I would mark up the chart with that data. So I think that is the extent of what I was seeing as questions in the chat box there. And it's 11:30, Carrie. If you want to kick me out of here, I'm happy to go. Or if you want to leave the floor open for some more Q&A, I'll follow your lead.
Okay. Let's see. Any more questions for Mike here? Anyone have anything else? Okay. I'm not seeing anything else pop up.
Let me just mention, there is a way to connect ForeFlight to your flight simulator. If you use X-Plane or if you use Flight Simulator 2020 or some of the others, you can connect ForeFlight to your simulator and practice these techniques in the comfort of your home, where you're not burning Hunter Lowlead and where you don't have to talk to Rob Reddig. He was your guest last month. He's not going to be bugging you for traffic point outs and all this stuff. It's a great way to practice these techniques and learn how to move around the app. So I would encourage that. And that's the technique I use when I teach an in-person class on how to do some of that stuff.
Mike, this is Mike Crawford. I got one question. Going back to your legal briefing, where exactly is the aircraft information associated with it?
Where is the
I created
aircraft?
one and I'm not seeing it.
Okay. Let's see. At the top here in the aircraft section, it's got my tail number. Is that what you're asking?
I was understanding that when you created the PDF, there was something in the PDF that would associate the aircraft.
Oh, it's not in the actual data. Let's look back at the briefing that we were looking at. This briefing doesn't say your tail number anywhere.
Okay.
But when I gathered that data, ForeFlight sent the tail number that I'm associating with this flight. It sent it to ForeFlight, and ForeFlight added this in their records. Okay, November 735 Charlie Yankee at 11:32 Pacific on December 19th, got a weather briefing from Brownfield to Long Beach. So they have that information there. It's not displayed, or you don't need to know that because you're the pilot. It's your airplane. You know what you're looking at already. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was thinking that you were saying if you had to show that you got a legal briefing, that this PDF would serve as that information because it had your tail number associated with it.
There may be a way. I mean, I've never heard of a pilot ever being asked by an inspector, investigator, can you prove that you got a briefing? And pilots who have been in that situation have just said, yes, I got a legal briefing using ForeFlight, and the investigator will then go to ForeFlight, and there's some way that they can ensure that you got the data, and they'll find the record of what information you had.
Okay, good enough.
Okay, yes, somebody says it connects nicely to an Avidyne 540 or an NGT 9. Never heard of an NGT 9000, but yes, ForeFlight will connect to a 540. It'll also connect to my 530 in my airplane. I have a FlightStream 210 installed in mine, so my ForeFlight will talk to my Garmin 530. And boy, I used this the very first time I had that FlightStream installed. We covered this last night in my 530 class. You can't put Victor Airways in a 530. It doesn't know about Victor Airways. But I can plan the flight on ForeFlight and put all the Victor Airways I want in here, and then I can send it to the 530, and it shows up in the flight plan database, and I can activate that flight plan, and now I got Victor Airways. So that's really a cool feature. Let's see, after packing, is all that information deleted too at some point? I would presume so. It might get superseded by newer data. I don't know the answer specifically to your question, but at some point it's got to age out, I would think. Also GNC 355, yep. Sorry, missed the part about freeing up space after packing. The only way to free up space that I know of is if we come down here to that More button again, and click on downloads this time. And this, by the way, is where you go to select which data you want to download. So for instance, I have almost every information. I didn't even know I could turn on street addresses. I think that's something new. So you tell it what kind of data I want. I want taxi diagrams, I want terminal procedures, VFR, IFR charts, and so forth. I'm not a helicopter pilot, but I go ahead and download that data anyway. So you tell it what data you want, what kind of data you want, and then you tell it what region do you want. And you select each individual state that you want to have. And I have the whole country in here. You have limited coverage near the southern Canadian border. You got some oceanic data. And I do look at this occasionally on my trips to Asia. So I download everything. And it shows you down here now which data has it installed. A little green check mark says that data is installed. And you can see here this little gray line across there, terminal procedures. And at the top it says taxi diagrams. So the top section there is taxi diagrams. As I scroll by, that heading stays up there. So these are all the terminal procedures I've got. There's a delete button up here. So you can tap delete, you can delete all the downloads. So I wanted to get rid of all the data that I have on here, or do I want to delete only the expired stuff? So you can click on that delete expired and it gets rid of all the expired data. So the only data you have now is current data. So that's how you do that. NGT 9000 and ADS-B transponder. Yes, I have a GTX 345 in my airplane. So that gives me my ADS-B in data. So that's the quid for the pro quo. I got my ADS-B out, presenting them the data. They're giving me the flight data, weather data, traffic data, and so forth. Got another update there. All right, what else we got? Or if you got nothing else, then hey.
Mike, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for
glad
asking.
to have you. Look forward to having you back down to the hangar at Brown Field.
Yeah, give me some of those sausages and pancakes.
Absolutely. All right, Mike.
All right, I will stop the share. We'll go back to normal there. And all right, then you have the aircraft, Gary.
All right, thank you so much. Open it up to the floor. Any questions or comments? Okay, all right. Lots of see a lot of good comments in chat there. Mike, thank you again.
Yeah, and if I can just throw in one more point, I need the ForeFlight training. This is really important. Anytime you get a new piece of equipment or you're using a new tool in the airplane, it's worth spending some time to get familiar with that new method, whatever it is. If it's a new navigator you have installed or a new EFB you're using, you need to spend some time and get familiar with it. And just by way of illustration, at work, flying this thing, when they first gave us the iPads about 6 or 8 years ago now, they would give us the iPad. We're still carrying around the cases full of paper charts. We're required to have a 6-month period where we have both tools available to ease this transition. So personally, I was familiar and comfortable enough. I've been a tech guy all my life, really. My first career was in software development. So I'm not afraid of computers at all. So I couldn't lose the paper charts fast enough and go to the iPad fast enough. I got rid of the paper just as quickly as I could. Yeah. But not everybody is that adept with it. And it takes some time, especially things like I showed you that the routes over LAX. If you get rid of the paper, you have to know where that data is. You have to get familiar with that. And the best way to do that is with some training. And whether you do it on your own, or you find a flight instructor or another pilot who's familiar, or even if all you do is watch the videos on the manufacturer's website, they have great videos. ForeFlight's constantly putting out great videos on how to use their tools. And these are the people who wrote it. So they know what they're doing way better than I do. And spend some time with that. It's really worthwhile. Let's see. Mark asks about the recording from a training last night. Yes, we did save it. if you go to captainshift.com, I think it is, that's Brian's website. He's got a link there, and we'll be emailing out a link to everybody who attended sometime in the next couple of days. I've been a little busy, so I haven't gotten to it since last night's, but yes, there will be a recording available for that sometime soon. And when I get it, I'll go ahead and email it to Kerry, and he can send it out to your group so everybody can get hold of it there.
Great. Thank you again, Mike. Wonderful having you here. Oh, not hearing you.
Yeah, I forgot I hit the mute button again.
Really like that picture of your office.
Yeah, nice, huh?
What a view.
Yeah, the view doesn't suck.
Not at all. All right.
It's a lot of water down there, though, is what I'm finding most of the time.
Oh my gosh, yes, for sure. Folks, we didn't have much of a business meeting today. If anyone has any chapter questions or issues to bring up, I'd like to entertain those now. If you have comments about the meeting or anything, if you would email them to me, you should have my email address as part of the meeting invite. And if no one has any other comments, I guess we'll call this one a wrap. Thank you all for attending.